All right, so here's a few news stories. This one caught my attention. I thought this might be nonsense or a small effect. This is not a small effect at all. This is hard to believe. They did a survey. 60% of young men in their 20s are single, and only 30% of women in that age range are single. So it is a huge difference. And furthermore, psychologists will tell you something that I think most of us know from just living, which is that men need relationships a lot more than women do. Women actually form close friendships and they don't really need a romantic partner as much. And men tend to go crazy when they're alone. They tend to become, that's why we have the incel movement, which is big in the Proud Boys, and a lot of the Trump supporters are this way. They're just like men that are sort of crazy because they're lonely. And anyway, men commit suicide at 4 times the rate of young women and so on. There's just a lot of people are worried about this. And I must say, it does seem to be a hazard in society to have so many men that are so lonely and miserable, because men get into trouble when they're lonely and miserable. It would be a good idea if they had something that arranged for them to make some friends, like, for example, military service or something like the Peace Corps or something. They should have some kind of organized activity where they make friends, because anyway, something like that. Anyway, that was interesting. And this one was also interesting. I heard about this for the last few days. So McCarthy in the Congress has given Fox News the entire thousands of hours of Capitol surveillance footage for January 6th. And when I first heard that, I wasn't quite sure whether that was so horrible. But the problem is, it reminded me in this article, Carlson is a huge contradictor of the truth about January 6th. I'm going to turn on the projector. He made this documentary called Patriot something or other, which was so bad, saying that January 6th was not bad at all. And I remember 3 of them made Patriot Purge, was this documentary that claimed all kinds of nonsense, that the January 6th thing was a false flag put on by somebody else, like the Antifa or something, which was one of the first lies Trump said about it before he changed to another 3 different lies. And so it is guaranteed. And remember, 3 of their most distinguished journalists at Fox quit just because Tucker did that, including one very famous guy who used to be one of their most reliable journalists. And so now he's going to have all 30,000 hours of footage from January 6th to go through there and pick out stuff and make further misleading nonsense out of it. So it's probably pretty bad. The Democrats are saying they might be able to stop this. It might be illegal on the grounds that it's a national security risk to just dump over completely unfiltered, unredacted footage of everything that happened in the Capitol on that day to a journalist. So we will see what comes of it.
Is it only the speaker's private camera or the whole building?
The whole building. And I think probably the body cam footage of the cops too, but I'm not quite sure. They say 30,000 hours of stuff.
That's somewhere they say it's office camera.
Which camera?
Somewhere it says the speaker's office camera.
Well, sure, maybe his office, but I think a lot more than that, because it's thousands of hours, and the whole event was only like 8 hours long, so that's got to be many cameras. Yeah, but I don't know all the details. Anyway, it'll be feeding the conspiracy theory nonsense, probably. There was this conference called S4, which I don't know much about, but this report sounds interesting. S4 was a industrial security conference, and they're talking about what they found here, and it's pretty interesting. Small utilities and small companies, like electricity companies and stuff, how to secure them. And they're talking about how the Department of Energy doesn't give them much guidance on security, and they don't have much information about what kind of cyber insurance is available, and it's hard to have metrics to decide how secure you are, which is an endemic problem in this entire industry, which is also why it's pretty hard to get insurance. I think the closest thing we have to metrics are compliance, where you have like SOC compliance. That means you have some level of security. And now, I didn't know this, the software bill of materials is really big. And now there are spin-off products, something called the SBOB, is Software Bill of Behaviors. So this is software bill of materials we've heard a lot about for the past 2 years since the SolarWinds attack, because the Russians took over a whole bunch of things by compromising the supply chain of the software you were using. And so people say we really should have a list of all the software packages being used, and that's software bill of materials. And now there are multiple commercial products that will prepare the software bill of materials for your stuff. And they were comparing these and deciding which product is better than others. And so apparently that's such a big deal now that there are other related things coming out. So that's interesting. And there's something called the Common Security Advisory Framework. I hadn't heard of that either. And then there's talks about talks here of people explaining how to try to do their industrial cybersecurity and how they need to improve it, which I think is a huge lesson. I've heard about this for many times in the past few years, that medical devices are incredibly insecure and industrial devices are incredibly insecure because the technology is from decades ago, before anybody thought about security, and they've just patched computer systems on them that are very primitive and out of date and have foolish, old-fashioned flaws like default passwords and such. So there's a lot of discussion of it. Anyway, it's a very important topic, and I learned a little bit by reading this summary of the conference. Tor is a very controversial project. It always has been. Tor provides anonymity to anybody who uses it by bouncing your traffic across several other devices before it gets to the endpoint, so nobody can tell your IP address or where you are. But the problem is it relies on people to donate servers, and it turns out that most of the servers are donated by the U.S. military. So the U.S. military can probably reverse it all. And almost all the private institutions like MIT and me briefly that used to donate servers to this have ceased donating servers to it because 99% of the traffic is horrible traffic you want to have nothing to do with, like ransomware and child pornography and blackmail demands and selling illegal things. And most everybody's decided just not to contribute to this project because so much of what happens on there is horrible. And now it turns out a bunch of their development infrastructure was donated from Team Kimru, and Team Kimru has been, for the last year, going through a terrible reputation attacks. They are an internet monitoring firm that sells information about internet traffic to the government and the military and police and such. And people have decided that they're not trustworthy, and you really can't have anything to do with them, so they're refusing to take their stuff. Anyway, we'll see what comes of it all. The Tor project has some very fierce defenders and very sophisticated people building the cryptology and cryptography devices and such, but there's some fundamental weaknesses with it too, and a lot of people argue about it on both sides. This I found very interesting. I think it might make a good project. If you have extensions in your browser like Chrome or Firefox, what can those extensions do? Well, the answer is they can do anything, and much of them are not vetted by anybody. And so he built a Chrome extension that steals everything, and he totally tells you how to do it. This is a very interesting project. I might really write this up and try it. So he made it so that all you have to do is you give it every possible permission. And then you just have some code like this, which looks like the code is, I think, in JavaScript. So these are all the permissions it has, which is every possible permission. And he found out that if you do give it an extension every possible permission, then it only shows you like the first 5. The screen is too small to show you the 50 other ones it's got. So users will not see it as being as outrageous as it is, even if users pay any attention to this screen, which I think they don't. Android apps are the same. When you install it, a box pops up saying this app has these permissions, and I don't think anybody actually reads that or pays attention to it. They just click OK to get it. And so anyway, after they've got all the permissions, now he's able to build extensions. So first he takes all your cookies from every website and steals them with the extension. He takes your history and your screenshots of your machine, as many screenshots as he likes, so that's pretty bad right there. Cookies means he can get in everything you're logged into, your Amazon, your Gmail, your everything. Then he can go into the user's browsing activity in real time. He can see the network traffic from every tab. And I think he gets it before it's encrypted, so he can steal your running traffic, including credentials, addresses, credit card numbers. He can make a keylogger to steal the key presses. He can steal input on any inject editable element. He can steal clipboard. Now, there was some kind of technical problem stealing the clipboard, so he wasn't able to make it as great as he wanted, but he is able to steal a lot of the content to the clipboard, so he'll get passwords you're pasting in from password managers. And he can get your geolocation, and he can reload tabs that you've left if you leave a tab unused long enough, it will sort of go to sleep, and he can silently wake it up and activate that old tab you've got there. I got people that tell me they have 100 tabs open all the time. So there's stuff there they haven't looked at in a week. And anyway, on it goes. Very interesting. And of course, you can't publish this in the Chrome Web Store. Like this, you would probably get caught. They would notice how malicious it is. But a lot of people download extensions from third-party sites. Anyway, I thought that was very interesting, and he's even got a version of it you can try. So I was thinking one thing would be to just get in a virtual machine and try this thing out. Of course, treat it like malware. It sounds pretty much like malware. Anyway, that's pretty interesting. That'd be a fun thing to play with. And this was very interesting. On Mac OS and iOS, this is a new whole category of privilege escalation bugs. And what happened is Apple has removed most ways to run arbitrary script in their iOS, and he found a hidden way to do it. This came from the forced entry sandbox escape, which was used by real malware. This was used by the stuff, I was talking about this in class recently, the stuff that the Prince of Saudi Arabia used to hack into Jeff Bezos' phone. He bought it from this company, this Israeli company, and you can just send anybody a text message, and when they open it, you take over their iPhone and you have everything from then on. This really powerful, really expensive, and available to people that can pay for it. And it uses this technique, the forced entry sandbox escape. And the way it worked, this guy wrote it up, and he figured out what it is. There is a security feature called NS Predicate. And what this does is it's something used by Messages in Safari, and NSP Predicate is some kind of security feature, but the point is it can actually execute code with the privileges of the process. And let me see if I can get a statement of what the NSP Predicate visitor. Yeah, that's the idea. NSP Predicate, this was some attempt to fix a previous flaw. This NSP Predicate is a function you can use to check arguments before you use them to make sure they are not going to have vulnerabilities like code injection. So it is intended to be used as a security feature, but it turned out that the NS Predicate function itself can execute code. So you can use the security feature to execute arbitrary code. And that's what he did. This is actually quite common, that security features turn out to open new vulnerabilities. It's why a lot of people hate antivirus in the security community, because there have been quite a few exploits where you take over the antivirus, and the antivirus, of course, has high privileges. So anyway, that's why I had a student who wanted to be safe from attackers, and they were using Kali Linux. And I said, I wouldn't do that, because Kali Linux is an attack framework, not a defense framework. For defense, you'd be better off with something like plain Debian or Cubes or something. But an attack tool is typically not protecting from attacks. Anyway, Microsoft is now talking about using ChatGPT to control robots on the grounds that you could then talk to the robot and they could understand what you say by using the language processing. And that part might be true, but the other part that's increasingly obvious is that ChatGPT has some serious flaws. It gets things wrong, it gets stuck in loops, it seems to sort of be hostile and crazy, and probably really shouldn't be in charge of mechanical motions. Anyway, all right, let me stop the news here.